The silence in the hospital hallway was broken only by the echo of firm footsteps on the Italian marble floor. A woman in a spotless white lab coat walked with the posture of someone who carried the weight of 1,000 battles won. Her hair was pulled back into an elegant bun, and her eyes, those eyes that had once cried oceans, now shone with unshakable determination. She stopped in front of room 408. Her hand trembled imperceptibly on the golden doorknob. On the other side of that door was the man who, 17 years earlier, had looked her in the eyes and spoken the cruelest words a daughter could ever hear. A nurse approached, whispering with reverence, "Dr. Coleman, the patient is waiting." The doctor took a deep breath, and for a brief second, a shadow of pain crossed her face. But it lasted only a second. She adjusted the badge hanging from her coat. "Dr. Sarah Coleman, medical director," and turned the knob. Inside the room, a gray-haired man visibly weakened by illness opened his eyes when he heard the door open. When their eyes met, time seemed to freeze. Recognition came slowly, then disbelief, and finally regret. "Sarah," his voice came out weak, almost a whisper weighted with decades of guilt. "My daughter, is it really you?" But to understand how that impossible encounter happened, to understand the journey of a mother who had been banished, humiliated, and abandoned, we need to go back in time, back to the day when everything began to fall apart, and paradoxically, the day when everything truly began. Washington, spring of 2008. Spring painted the American capital with vibrant colors, but inside the Coleman mansion in the elegant neighborhood of Georgetown, the colors were quickly fading from Sarah's life. At 22, Sarah Coleman was the middle child of one of Washington's most traditional and respected families. Her father, Richard Coleman, was a real estate magnate, owner of a fortune built over 3 generations. The Coleman family wasn't just wealthy, it was influential, connected, part of the elite that pulled the invisible strings of power in the capital. Sarah was in her final year of medical school at Georgetown University. She had always been the studious daughter, the one who followed the rules, the one who had never caused trouble. Unlike her older sister, Victoria, who lived for appearances and social events, or her younger brother, Marcus, who wasted the family fortune on endless parties, Sarah had dreams of her own. She wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to make a difference. She wanted to prove she was more than just the Coleman heiress. But that April morning, sitting in the bathroom of her student apartment, staring at the positive pregnancy test in her trembling hands, Sarah felt her world collapse. "This can't be real," she whispered to herself, tears already streaming down her face. "Please God, it can't be real." But it was undeniably real. Her relationship with David had been brief, intense, and, as she would discover in a few weeks, completely illusory. He was a law student, charming, from a good family. They had met at a charity event organized by his family. For 3 months, Sarah had believed she had finally found someone who saw her beyond the Coleman name. How wrong she was. When Sarah told David about the pregnancy, 2 days after discovering it, his transformation was instant and terrifying. "Are you sure it's mine?" Those were his first words, spoken with a disdain that cut Sarah like a blade. They were in a cafe near campus. Sarah felt the blood freeze in her veins. "How can you ask me that?" Her voice came out shaky, incredulous. "David, you were the only one. I never." "Listen, Sarah," he interrupted, glancing around nervously as if afraid of being seen with her. "I have plans. I'm interning at my father's firm this summer, and then I have my career in Congress lined up. I can't have the problem like this ruining everything." "Problem?" Sarah repeated, feeling nauseous. "You're calling our baby a problem? Our baby?" David laughed, a bitter, cruel sound. "There's no our baby, Sarah. There's a mistake that needs to be fixed. You know what you have to do. I'll pay for the procedure, of course. Just take care of it." Sarah felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. "You're asking me to." "I'm not asking anything." David stood up, tossing some bills on the table. "I'm telling you what's going to happen. You fix this, or I just vanish from your life. Your choice." And he left. He simply stood up and walked away, leaving Sarah alone in that cafe, with a shattered heart and an uncertain future growing inside her. Sarah sat there for more than an hour, her hands protectively over her still flat stomach. silent tears streaming down her face. People walked by, life went on around her, but she was trapped in that impossible moment. She thought about her options. She thought about her dreams of becoming a doctor. She thought about her family's disappointment. She thought about how her life, so carefully planned, had been turned upside down in a matter of seconds. But above all, she thought about the life growing inside her. An innocent life. A life that hadn't asked to be conceived, but that now existed. A life that depended entirely on her. And in that moment, in that ordinary Washington cafe, Sarah Coleman made the most important decision of her life. "I'm going to love you," she whispered, her hand still over her stomach. "No matter what happens, I'm going to love you. I promise." But Sarah had no idea how hard it would be to keep that promise. 3 weeks had passed. 3 weeks in which Sarah carried the weight of her secret alone while trying to maintain the appearance of normality. 3 weeks in which she went through morning sickness, hiding in the university bathrooms. 3 weeks in which she pretended everything was fine while her inner world collapsed. David had kept his promise. He simply disappeared. He changed his phone number, began avoiding the places where they used to meet, and when Sarah finally confronted him on campus, he was clear and cruel. "I don't want anything to do with this. You choosing to continue with this pregnancy is your problem. Don't count on me for anything. And if you try to force me into something legally, my father has the best lawyers in Washington. Good luck." Sarah then realized she was completely alone. But there was one person she needed to talk to. One person who, despite all her flaws, had always been her safe harbor. Her mother. Elizabeth Coleman was an elegant and refined woman, shaped by decades of life in Washington's high society. She organized charity events, sat on museum boards, and was known for her grace and discretion. But behind the perfect facade, she was a mother who loved her children deeply, even if she didn't always know how to show it. Sarah asked her mother to have lunch with her on a Saturday. Just the two of them. They met at a discreet restaurant in Alexandria, on the other side of the Potomac River. Elizabeth noticed immediately that something was wrong. "Sweetheart, you're pale," she said, gently touching Sarah's face. "Have you been sleeping well?" Sarah tried to begin several times, the words refusing to come out. Finally, with tears in her eyes, she simply said, "Mom, I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Elizabeth froze completely, her fork suspended in the air, her eyes wide. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant, Mom," Sarah repeated, her voice breaking. "And the father, he doesn't want anything to do with it. I'm scared. I'm so scared." Elizabeth placed her fork on the plate with excessive care, as if trying to stay in control. When she looked at Sarah again, there were tears in her eyes. "Oh, my daughter," she whispered, taking Sarah's hand across the table. "My sweet girl. I don't know what to say. I know I disappointed you." Sarah sobbed. "I know I ruined everything. But Mom, I can't. David wants me to have an abortion, but I can't. I know this will complicate everything. I know I'll have to delay my graduation. I know the family will be disappointed, but Sarah breathed. Elizabeth squeezed her hand. "We'll figure this out. Together. But you need to tell your father." The fear that crossed Sarah's face was visceral. "Mom, you know how Dad is. He's going to—" "I know," Elizabeth agreed, and there was a tremor in her voice. "But he needs to know. And the longer we wait, the worse it will get." Dinner was set for the following Sunday. The Coleman family always had Sunday dinner together. It was a sacred tradition imposed by Richard. Sarah spent the entire week with her stomach in knots, barely able to eat or sleep. When Sunday arrived, Sarah came down the stairs of the Coleman mansion feeling as if she were walking to her own judgment. The dining table was set with the family's fine china, everything immaculate, everything perfect as the facade they were about to shatter. Richard Coleman sat at the head of the table, an imposing 58-year-old man with perfectly combed gray hair and a flawless suit even for a Sunday dinner. Beside him was Victoria, the eldest daughter, 27, married to a corporate lawyer and always concerned with appearances. Marcus, 19, was absorbed in his phone as usual. Sarah's mother gave her a silent look of encouragement when she sat down. Dinner began with the usual conversation. Richard talked about business, Victoria about the next charity event she was organizing. Marcus barely answered when asked about his studies. Sarah barely touched her food. "Sarah, are you all right?" Richard finally asked, noticing her silence. "You've hardly touched your dinner. Are you sick?" Elizabeth answered for her, her voice carefully controlled. "Richard, dear, Sarah has something important to tell us." The silence that fell over the table was immediate. Victoria looked up from her plate, curious. Marcus finally put his phone down. Richard leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on Sarah. "I'm listening," he said, and there was something in his tone that made Sarah shiver. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling under the table. "Dad, I made a mistake," she began, her voice barely a whisper. I'm pregnant." What happened next was like watching an explosion in slow motion. Richard's face turned red, then purple. Victoria let out a gasp. Marcus simply stared, mouth open. "You're pregnant." Richard roared, slamming his hand on the table so hard that the plates rattled. "How dare you bring this shame to this family?" "Richard, please." Elizabeth tried to intervene, but he silenced her with a furious glare. "Be quiet, Elizabeth," he snapped, turning back to Sarah as he rose from his chair. "Who is the father? Is that idiot going to take responsibility? Or is he as pathetic as my daughter?" "Dad, please, let me explain. Explain," he shouted, pacing the dining room like a caged animal. "What is there to explain? You threw away your entire future, this family's entire reputation for what? A moment of stupidity. Do you have any idea what this means?" Sarah was crying openly now, her body trembling. "I know I made a mistake, Dad, but I can't." "You're going to fix this," Richard interrupted, his voice now low and dangerous. "Tomorrow, we'll schedule a procedure. We have the best doctors. We'll do it discreetly. No one needs to know." "No," Sarah said, her voice low but firm. "I'm not doing that." The silence that followed was absolute. Richard froze as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. "What did you say?" "I said no," Sarah repeated, lifting her chin even as tears streamed down her face. "I'm not having an abortion. I'm having this baby." It was Victoria who broke the silence, her voice dripping with disdain. "You can't be serious, Sarah. You're going to ruin your life, ruin our reputation over a mistake? What kind of future will that baby have? What kind of mother can you be at 22, without finishing college, without your own money?" "Victoria, shut your mouth." Elizabeth finally found her voice. "This is none of your business." "None of my business?" Victoria laughed, a bitter sound. "When our name is being dragged through the mud of all Washington, it will be everyone's problem." But Richard was staring at Sarah with an expression she had never seen before. It was a mix of disappointment, rage, and something that resembled pure contempt. "So that's your final decision?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "You're going to ignore what's best for you, for this family, and insist on having that baby?" Sarah wiped her tears and met her father's eyes. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "This is my child. I'm having this baby, with or without the family support." Richard remained silent for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Very well," he said, and something in his tone made Sarah's blood run cold. "Then you've made your choice, and now I'll make mine." And so, on that Sunday dinner at the Coleman Mansion, Sarah's fate was sealed. 2 weeks after that fateful dinner, Sarah was sitting in the waiting room of her obstetrician's clinic, Dr. Patricia Morrison, an experienced and kind doctor who had been recommended by her mother. Beside her, Elizabeth held her hand firmly. Since the dinner, the tension in the Coleman Mansion had been unbearable. Richard barely spoke to Sarah. Victoria avoided her completely. Only Marcus, surprisingly, had shown some support, even if silently. But it was Elizabeth who was there, who had insisted on accompanying Sarah to every appointment, who cried silently at night, torn between love for a daughter and loyalty to her husband. Sarah Coleman, the nurse called, and the two women stood up. The appointment began like all the others. Blood pressure check, questions about symptoms, discussion of prenatal vitamins. But then came the ultrasound. Dr. Morrison moved the transducer over Sarah's belly. her eyes fixed on the monitor. Sarah and Elizabeth watched the screen, where a tiny form was visible, the heart beating strong and steady. Tears of emotion ran down Sarah's face. "It's real," she whispered. "My baby is real." But she noticed Dr. Morrison furrowing her brow, moving the transducer repeatedly over the same area, enlarging certain images, measuring and remeasuring. "Is something wrong?" Elizabeth asked, her voice tense. Dr. Morrison turned off the equipment and faced them, her expression carefully neutral. "Sarah, Elizabeth, I need to explain something I noticed on the ultrasound," she began, pulling her chair closer. "There are some markers I'm seeing markers that suggest the baby may have Down syndrome." Sarah's world stopped. She heard the words, but they seemed to come from very far away. "What?" she managed to say. "They are just markers, not a definitive diagnosis," Dr. Morrison continued, her voice gentle but professional. "I see increased nuchal translucency and a few other subtle signs. I recommend we do an amniocentesis to confirm." "Oh my God!" Elizabeth put her hand to her mouth, pale. Sarah was in shock, unable to process the information. Down syndrome. Her baby. Her little baby, whom she already loved so much. But will he be okay?" she asked, her voice desperate. "Will my baby survive?" "Sarah, children with Down syndrome can live full and wonderful lives." Dr. Morrison held her hand. "But they need special care, therapies, and ongoing support. I won't lie to you. It will be challenging, but it can also be incredibly rewarding." The following weeks were a whirlwind. The amniocentesis confirmed the diagnosis, Down syndrome, or trisomy 21. Sarah spent days obsessively researching, reading everything she could find about the condition, trying to understand what it would mean for her child. But the diagnosis changed nothing for her. If anything, it only strengthened her determination. This was her baby, her son who needed her. She would not abandon him. Telling Richard, however, was devastating. Sarah asked to meet with her parents in her father's office at home. It was a Saturday afternoon. She entered the dark, wood-paneled office where Richard spent hours working. He was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, Elizabeth in an armchair beside him. "So," Richard said, without looking up from the documents in front of him, "what's the reason for this meeting?" Sarah took a deep breath and told them. She explained the ultrasound, the amniocentesis, the Down syndrome diagnosis. When she finished, Richard finally looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes froze her to the bone. "So not only are you insisting on keeping this bastard," he said, his voice as cold as ice, "but now you want to bring a disabled child into this family?" "Richard." Elizabeth stood, horrified. How can you? How can I?" he roared, standing as well. "How can I? The question is, how can you, Elizabeth? How can you stand by this betrayal of everything we've built?" He turned to Sarah, and there was hatred in his eyes, pure and simple hatred. "You had a chance to correct your mistake, a chance to do the right thing, and you refused. And now you come to me and tell me you're bringing not just an illegitimate child, but a disabled child into this family, to stain our name, our reputation. He is not a mistake." Sarah shouted, tears streaming down her face. "He is my son. He is your grandson. He is nothing to me." Richard bellowed, pounding his fist on the desk. "And neither are you anymore." The silence that followed was broken only by Sarah's sobs. Richard composed himself, straightening his suit, his voice returning to that dangerous calm. "I'm giving you one last chance, Sarah," he said. "Either you fix this now, or you leave this house and this family. There will be no more money. There will be no more support. There will be no more Coleman name for you. You will be alone." Sarah looked at her mother, pleading with her eyes. Elizabeth was crying, torn, destroyed. "Elizabeth," Richard said, not looking at his wife, "you also have to choose, her or me." Elizabeth closed her eyes, tears silently streaming. When she opened them again, she looked at Sarah with a silent apology. "Sarah, dear," she whispered, her voice breaking, "please, just think about what you're giving up. Your education, your family, your future, all of it for my son." Sarah finished, her voice firm even through the tears. "Yes, Mother, All of it for my son, because he deserves a mother who loves him, who will fight for him. And if you can't see that, if you can't accept that, then..." She paused, wiped her tears, and lifted her chin. "Then I choose my son." Richard nodded, as if he had expected that answer. "Very well," he said. "Then leave my house. Now." "Richard, please." Elizabeth pleaded. "She has nowhere to go. She's pregnant." "That's no longer my problem," he said coldly. "She made her choice. Now she will live with the consequences." Sarah looked one last time at her parents. Her father, with that look of contempt she would never forget. Her mother, crying but unable to defend her own daughter. And then she turned and left. Sarah went up to her room in the mansion for the last time. Her hand shook as she pulled 2 suitcases from the closet and began throwing clothes into them. There was no method, no organization. It was pure desperation. She heard a noise at the door and turned, expecting to see Elizabeth. But it was Marcus. Her younger brother entered the room hesitantly, his eyes red. At 19, Marcus had always been the least serious of the Colemans, more interested in parties and cars than responsibilities. But now, seeing his sister packing with tears streaming down her face, something in him changed. "Sarah," he said softly, "are you really leaving?" Sarah couldn't respond, only nodded as she folded a blouse. Marcus stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind him. He pulled his wallet from his pocket and took out several cards. "Here," he said, holding them out to her. "There's about $3,000 on my credit cards. It's not much, but..." "Marcus, I can't accept this," Sarah said, but her voice was breaking. "Yes, you can," he insisted, pressing the cards into her hand. "Sarah, I know I'm an idiot. I know I've never taken anything seriously. But you're my sister, and what Dad is doing, it's wrong. Very wrong." Sarah hugged him, sobbing against his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not hating me." "I could never hate you," he said, his voice also thick with emotion. "You're the bravest person I know." When Marcus left, Sarah finished packing. She looked around the room that had been hers her whole life. The pink walls she had chosen at 12, the desk where she had studied to get into Georgetown, the bed where she had cried when she broke her arm at 7 and her father carried her to the hospital. So many memories, a whole life. And now she was leaving it all behind. She carried the suitcases down the stairs. In the living room, Elizabeth was sitting on the couch, silently crying. When she saw Sarah, she stood up. "Darling, please," she begged one last time. "Please, don't do this. We can find a solution. We can." "Mom," Sarah interrupted, her voice surprisingly firm. "You didn't choose to defend me. You chose him. And I understand. You've been married to him for 30 years. But I chose my son. And that is a choice I will never regret." She turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "When my baby is born," she said, without looking back, "I will name him Ethan." Ethan means strong and firm. Because he will need to be strong. And so will I. And with that, Sarah Coleman walked out of the Georgetown mansion, leaving behind everything she had ever known. The first night was the hardest. Sarah used one of Marcus' cards to pay for a night at a cheap motel in Arlington. It was dirty, noisy, scary. So different from the safety and comfort of the Coleman mansion. She lay on the hard bed, a protective hand over her belly, and allowed herself to cry. She cried for everything she had lost. She cried for the father who had rejected her. She cried for the mother who hadn't had the courage to defend her. She cried for the uncertain future that awaited her. But when the tears finally dried, Sarah wiped her face and got up. She couldn't afford to fall apart. She had a child on the way, a child who depended entirely on her. In the following days, Sarah began to make a plan. First, she needed money. Marcus' $3,000 wouldn't last long. She contacted the university and managed to get permission to postpone her graduation from medical school by a year, citing family issues. Then she started looking for work, but she quickly realized how difficult it was for a young pregnant woman with no significant professional experience to find something that paid enough to survive in Washington. It was Marcus who, secretly, gave her the idea that would change everything. He called her 2 weeks after she had left home. His voice was low, conspiratorial. "Sarah, "Have you thought about leaving Washington?" he asked. "Leaving? Where would I go?" "Anywhere far from here. Away from Dad. Away from everyone who knows the Coleman name. You could start over. Be just Sarah, you know. Not Sarah Coleman." The idea took root in Sarah's mind. Leave Washington. Start over. Build a life where no one knew where she came from. What family had rejected her? She spent the night researching cities. She wanted somewhere she could find work, where the cost of living wasn't prohibitive, but that still had good medical resources for when Ethan was born. And that's how she found Dallas, Texas. Dallas was big enough to have opportunities, but not as expensive as other major cities. It had excellent hospitals specializing in children with special needs. And best of all, it was far enough from Washington for her to truly start over. Sarah bought a bus ticket with the last dollars she had left. It was a 24-hour trip, but she didn't care. When the Greyhound bus left the Washington bus station on a rainy May morning, Sarah looked out the back window and watched the Capitol disappear over the horizon. It was the last time she would see Washington for many years. The journey was exhausting. The bus stopped every few hours, picking up and dropping off passengers in small towns along the way. Sarah tried to sleep, but the discomfort of the seats and anxiety about the future kept her awake most of the time. She talked silently to the baby in her belly, promising him a better future, even without knowing how she would keep that promise. When the bus finally arrived at the Dallas bus station, Sarah got off with her 2 suitcases and looked around. The May heat of Texas was oppressive, so different from the mild spring of Washington. The sun shone brightly in a vast blue sky. Sarah had only $300 left and no place to stay. But she had something more important, determination. And she had Ethan. That was enough to begin. The first months in Dallas were the hardest of Sarah's life. She found a tiny room to rent in a not-so-great area of the city, sharing an apartment with 3 other women. The room barely fit a single bed and a small dresser, but it cost only $400 a month. Sarah got a job as a waitress at a 24-hour diner downtown. The work was exhausting, the hours long, and standing for 8-hour shifts while pregnant was agonizing. But she desperately needed the money. Her co-workers were an eclectic group of women, most dealing with their own struggles. It was there that Sarah met Rosa Martinez, a 45-year-old veteran waitress and mother of 4. Rosa immediately noticed that Sarah was pregnant and struggling. One particularly difficult night, when Sarah was clearly exhausted, Rosa pulled her aside. "Sweetheart, you're pregnant. How far along?" "For months," Sarah admitted, rubbing her sore back. "And the father?" "He's out of the picture," Sarah said simply. Rosa nodded, as if she had heard that story 1,000 times before. "You have family? Anyone helping you?" Sarah shook her head, tears threatening to spill. "Then you're one of us," Rosa said, not with pity, but with a strange mix of solidarity and respect. "The fighters, the ones who don't give up." From that day on, Rosa became something of a surrogate mother to Sarah. She taught her the tricks of being a waitress, how to get better tips, how to handle difficult customers. Most importantly, she gave her hope. "I raised 4 kids on my own," Rosa told Sarah on a slow night. "My ex left when the youngest was 6 months old. You know what I did? I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs. My back still hurts today, but all my kids graduated high school. 2 went to college. You know why? Because they saw their mother fight. They saw that giving up wasn't an option." "But my child," Sarah began, her voice breaking. "He has Down syndrome. He'll need so much more than I can give." Rosa cupped Sarah's face in her calloused hands. "Then you work harder. You fight fiercer. You love more intensely. It's not about what you can give now, sweetheart. It's about what you're willing to do for your child." Those words echoed in Sarah's mind as she worked double shifts, saving every penny she could. She learned to live with the bare minimum. Her clothes came from thrift stores. Her meals were what was left over from the diner. She allowed herself no luxuries. But she kept money aside for one thing: books about Down syndrome. Sarah spent her few free hours at the Dallas Public Library, devouring everything she could find about her child's condition. She learned about early interventions that could make a difference: occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. about the power of love and stimulation from birth. The more she read, the more she realized something important. Children with Down syndrome could have incredible lives, but only if they had the right support. And she was determined to give Ethan everything he needed. When Sarah was 6 months pregnant, something happened that would change her trajectory. It was a Tuesday night at the diner, and Sarah was serving an elderly man dining alone. He ordered coffee and apple pie, and as Sarah served him, he noticed she was pregnant. "When's the big day?" he asked kindly. "December," Sarah replied with a tired smile. "You're first." "Yes, sir." They chatted briefly, and Sarah noticed he was different from most customers. Polite, interested, kind. When he finished and paid the bill, he left a $50 tip. Sarah ran after him as he was leaving. "Sir, you must have made a mistake. The bill was only $15. "I didn't make a mistake," he said, with a kind smile. "I recognize determination when I see it. Good luck with your baby, young lady." And he left, but he came back. Every Tuesday, always asking for Sarah's section, always leaving generous tips. His name was Dr. Harold Chun, and he had been a professor of medicine at UT Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas before retiring. One of those Tuesdays, when Sarah was 7 months pregnant, Dr. Chun finally asked the question that would change everything. "Sarah, why are you working as a waitress?" he asked, not judgmentally, but with genuine curiosity. Exhausted and emotional, Sarah told him everything. About being in medical school, about the pregnancy, about Ethan's diagnosis, about being rejected by her family, about coming to Dallas with nothing. When she finished, tears were in her eyes. "I was going to be a doctor," she said, her voice breaking. "It was all I ever wanted. But now I just want to be the best mother I can be for my son." Dr. Chun was silent for a long moment. Then he wrote something on a napkin and pushed it across the table. "This is my cell phone number," he said. "When your baby is born, and when you're ready, call me. I know people at UT Southwestern. Maybe we can find a way for you to get back into medicine, but at a pace that works for you and your child." Sarah looked at the napkin, then at Dr. Chun, unable to believe it. "Why would you do this for me?" she whispered. "Because 30 years ago, my daughter got pregnant in her final year of college," he said softly. "And I did what your father did. I rejected her. I told her to take care of the problem. And she did. She had an abortion because I pressured her. And then she never spoke to me again. Neither she nor my grandchildren I never met, because she never had children after that." Tears rolled down the aged face of Dr. Chun. "I can't undo what I did with my daughter, but maybe I can help fix what your father did to you." Sarah kept that napkin as if it were gold. It was more than a phone number. It was hope. It was a promise that her dream of becoming a doctor was not completely dead. December arrived with an unusual chill for Dallas. Sarah was enormous, uncomfortable, and incredibly anxious. She had stopped working at the diner 2 weeks earlier than planned, after Rosa insisted she was risking too much. "You've already proven how strong you are," Rosa had said firmly. "Now rest. Your baby will need you strong when he arrives." Sarah was in the tiny room she rented when the contractions began. It was 3 in the morning on December 14th, 2008. She was alone, and the fear that gripped her was visceral. She called Rosa, who came immediately. On the way to the hospital, Sarah held Rosa's hand tightly, trying not to panic. "It's going to be okay, Mija," Rosa said, driving as fast as she could. "You're strong. Your baby is strong. You'll get through this." The labor was long and difficult, 12 hours. Sarah didn't have an epidural because she couldn't afford one. She had no one by her side except Rosa, but she fought, just as she had fought for everything over the past months. And when, at 3:15 p.m., the cries of a baby filled the delivery room, Sarah collapsed in tears of relief and joy. "It's a boy," the nurse announced, placing the small baby wrapped in a blanket on Sarah's chest. Sarah looked at her son's face for the first time. Ethan had the almond-shaped eyes characteristic of Down syndrome, a small, flattened nose, and the most indignant cry she had ever heard. And he was absolutely perfect. "Hi, my love," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, my Ethan. Mommy's here. Mommy will always be here." Ethan grasped Sarah's finger with his tiny hand, and in that moment, Sarah felt her heart expand in a way she never imagined possible. All the suffering, all the rejection, all the struggle, it had all been worth this moment. Rosa was crying too, holding the disposable camera Sarah had bought to capture the birth. "He's perfect, Sarah," Rosa said, snapping photo after photo. "Absolutely perfect." But the challenges began immediately. The doctors explained that Ethan had some common health issues in babies with Down syndrome. His muscle tone was low, making breastfeeding difficult. He had a small heart defect that would need monitoring. He would have developmental delays. Sarah absorbed every word and started asking questions. Lots of questions. What therapies would he need? When should they start? What warning signs should she watch for? What exercises could she do at home to help him? The doctors were impressed by her determination and knowledge. It was clear she had done extensive research. "You're going to be a wonderful mother for this boy," said the pediatrician, Dr. Lisa Johnson. "He's lucky to have you." Sarah stayed in the hospital for 2 days. 2 days of learning to breastfeed, changing tiny diapers, simply watching her child sleep, marveling at his existence. When it was time to go home, Sarah suddenly felt terrified. She was taking this small, fragile baby back to that tiny room. How would she care for him alone? What if she made a mistake? What if she wasn't enough? Rosa, reading her thoughts, placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "You'll make mistakes, yes," she said honestly. "All mothers do. But you'll learn. And most importantly, you love him. Love, Mija. Love is what matters most." The first months with Ethan were simultaneously the most wonderful and the most difficult of Sarah's life. Ethan was a demanding baby. He had trouble feeding, and Sarah spent hours trying to nurse him, often in tears of frustration and exhaustion. He didn't sleep much, and when he did, Sarah stayed awake, checking if he was breathing, paranoid that something might go wrong. But he was also the most precious thing she had ever seen. The way he looked at her, the little sounds he made, the feeling of his weight in her arms. Every small milestone, the first smile, even if delayed, the first gurgle, the first time he held his head up, was celebrated as the greatest achievement. Sarah returned to work when Ethan was 3 months old. She had no choice. The money had run out. Finding affordable childcare for a child with special needs was nearly impossible. Once again, Rosa saved the day. She offered to care for Ethan during Sarah's shifts, refusing any payment. "You'll do the same for another mother someday," she said simply. "That's how it works. We help each other." Sarah worked at the diner during the day, then rushed home to pick up Ethan. The nights were dedicated to him. Feeding, bathing, playtime, and physiotherapy exercises she had learned on YouTube and from library books. And in the few hours Ethan slept, Sarah studied. She had not given up on her dream of becoming a doctor. She couldn't. Ethan deserved a mother who could not only care for him, but truly make a difference for other children like him. When Ethan turned 6 months old, Sarah finally gathered the courage to call Dr. Chun. "Hello," the familiar voice answered. "Dr. Chun? It's Sarah from the diner. I had my baby, and I'm ready to try again, if the offer still stands." There was a pause, then Sarah heard the emotion in Dr. Chen's voice. "Sarah, I was waiting for your call. Let's talk." The meeting with Dr. Chun took place in a cafe near the UT Southwestern Medical Center. Sarah arrived with Ethan in her arms, nervous but hopeful. Dr. Chun was waiting at a corner table, and his face lit up when he saw them. "So this is young Ethan," he said, looking at the baby tenderly. "Hello, little warrior." Ethan, now 6 months old and increasingly alert, looked at Dr. Chun with curiosity, his almond-shaped eyes bright and expressive. "He's beautiful, Sarah," Dr. Chun said, genuine emotion in his voice. "Absolutely beautiful." They talked for more than 2 hours. Sarah explained her situation. She was 1 year away from completing her medical degree. She still wanted to become a doctor, but she needed flexibility to care for Ethan. She needed financial support, as her savings had run out. Dr. Chun listened carefully, asking questions and taking notes. "I've spoken with some colleagues at the university," he finally said, "and I have a proposal for you. It's challenging. It will require incredibly hard work, but it's possible. He explained. Sarah could enroll at UT Southwestern as a transfer student. Due to her exemplary academic record at Georgetown, most of her credits would be accepted. She could complete her final year of medical school at a slower pace, allowing her to balance it with motherhood. It will probably take 2 years instead of 1, he explained. But you can take most of the classes online or at night. And as for tuition, he pushed an envelope across the table. A fund has been set up. Don't thank me, he said as Sarah began to speak, tears in her eyes. Consider it an advance payment. One day, when you become a successful doctor, help another struggling mother. Pay it forward. Sarah couldn't believe it. It was a second chance, an opportunity to rebuild her dreams while caring for her son. I won't disappoint you, she promised, her voice trembling. I swear I won't. I know you won't, Dr. Chen said with a smile, because you've already proven what you're capable of. Now, let's make you Dr. Sarah. The following years were the hardest and simultaneously the most rewarding of Sarah's life. She enrolled at UT Southwestern in January 2009, when Ethan was 1 month old. Her routine was brutal, waking at 5 a.m., caring for Ethan, dropping him off with Rosa, attending classes or clinical rotations, rushing back in the afternoon to pick him up, spending the evening caring for him and studying while he slept, getting a few hours of sleep, and starting over. There were no weekends, no days off, no time for herself. But Sarah did not complain. Every time she looked at Ethan, every time he reached a new developmental milestone, even if delayed compared to other children, she found the energy to keep going. Ethan began physical therapy at 3 months, occupational therapy at 6 months, and speech therapy when he turned 1. Sarah took him faithfully to every session, even when exhausted, even when she had important exams. The therapists were impressed with her commitment. Mothers like you make all the difference, Ethan's physical therapist, Jennifer, said to Sarah after a particularly difficult session. You're giving him all the tools he needs to succeed in life. Ethan was developing, yes, more slowly, but steadily. At 2 years old, he began walking, each step a monumental victory. Sarah cried with joy when he took his first tentative steps toward her in the small apartment. That's it, love, she shouted, encouraging him. You can do it. Come to mommy. When he finally reached her arms and she picked him up, spinning him around the room, Sarah knew that all the sleepless nights, all the hours of therapy, all the sacrifice had been worth it. During this time, Sarah also developed a special interest in pediatrics, particularly developmental medicine. She wanted to understand not only how to treat children with special needs, but how to support their families. She wrote her undergraduate thesis on early intervention in children with Down syndrome, optimizing outcomes through integrated family support. The work was so impressive that it was published in a medical journal, a rare achievement for an undergraduate student. When Sarah finally graduated from medical school in May 2011, almost 3 years after leaving Washington, it was one of the most emotional moments of her life. She stood in line to receive her diploma, wearing her cap and gown, with 3-and-a-half-year-old Ethan sitting on Rosa's lap in the audience. When her name was called, Sarah Coleman, she walked across the stage with her head held high. There was no family to applaud, no Richard, Elizabeth, Victoria, or Marcus to witness it, but she had Rosa, standing and cheering as if Sarah were her own daughter. She had Dr. Chun, sitting in the front row with tears in his eyes, and she had Ethan, who shouted mommy when he saw her on stage, making the entire audience laugh and turned to look. And for Sarah, that was more than enough. After graduation, Sarah was accepted into the pediatrics residency at UT Southwestern. It was a 3-year, intensive, exhausting program. But there was one advantage. She would finally be receiving a salary, small but steady. For the first time since leaving Washington, Sarah could move into a decent apartment. She found a small 2-bedroom apartment in a safe area of Dallas. It wasn't luxurious, but it had a room for Ethan, a small living area, and a kitchen where she could prepare home-cooked meals. On moving day, as Sarah arranged the few belongings she owned in the new apartment, Ethan ran from room to room, exploring everything with excitement. "Mom, in my room," he shouted, his speech still a little imprecise, but understandable. Sarah entered the room, and found him standing in the middle of the small space, his eyes shining with joy. "Yes, love," she said, kneeling beside him. "This is your room. Do you like it?" "I love it," he said, throwing his arms around her neck. Sarah held him tight, tears streaming down her face. They had come so far, from the tiny little room where Ethan spent his first years, to this apartment, to this new life. "We did it, Ethan," she whispered against his hair. "We really did it." But Sarah was only just beginning. Sarah's medical residency was as exhausting as she had anticipated. 36-hour shifts, heartbreaking pediatric emergencies, the responsibility of tiny lives in her hands. But she loved every second. She was particularly interested in cases involving children with special needs. She saw in those patients a reflection of Ethan, in the struggling families a reflection of herself years ago. And she began to notice something. Many of these families were lost, scared, unsupported. Doctors would give the diagnosis, explain treatment options, but there was no one to say to these mothers and fathers, "I understand. I've been there. It will be okay." That's how Sarah began to write. It started as a form of therapy. On nights when Ethan finally slept and she was too exhausted to study, Sarah opened her laptop and wrote. She wrote about her journey, about the diagnosis, about being rejected by her family, about the struggle, the pain, but also the joy, the love, the small victories. She wrote about Ethan's first smile, which came at 4 months instead of 6 weeks like most babies. She wrote about his first mommy, which he said at 2.5 years old. She wrote about every step, every word, every hug. And she wrote about the pain of being abandoned, the pain of fighting alone, the pain of seeing her child judged by people who didn't know him. But above all, she wrote about hope. After months of writing, Sarah had hundreds of pages. She wasn't sure what to do with it. It felt too intimate to share, she thought. But then something happened that changed her perspective. Sarah was at the hospital on a particularly difficult day. A young mother, 20 years old, had just received the diagnosis that her newborn son had Down syndrome. The woman was devastated, crying inconsolably. Sarah entered the room, not as the resident doctor, but as a mother who had been in exactly that place. "May I sit?" she asked gently. The young mother nodded, unable to speak through her sobs. "I'm Dr. Sarah," she began, "and I want to tell you a story. A story about a 22-year-old who received the exact same diagnosis you just received." And Sarah told her. She told everything. The rejection, the struggle, but most importantly, she told about Ethan, about how amazing he was, about how he had taught her unconditional love, about how he was the best thing that had ever happened to her. When she finished, the young mother was looking at her with admiration. You really went through that? And you became a doctor? With your child?" "Yes," Sarah said with a smile. "And it wasn't easy, but it was possible. And your child, he's going to be amazing. You just need to give him love and support. The rest comes with time." The young mother hugged Sarah, crying, but now the tears were of relief and hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for showing me there's light at the end of the tunnel." It was after that encounter that Sarah made a decision. She would publish her stories, not for fame or money, but because other mothers, other fathers, needed to hear that they were not alone. Over the following year, Sarah transformed her writings into a book. She worked on it during her rare free hours, refining, editing, adding chapters on resources, practical tips, hope. The book was called My Son, My Hero, a journey of unconditional love through Down syndrome. Sarah didn't have money for a traditional publisher, so she self-published through an online platform. She didn't expect much. Maybe a few families would read it. Maybe it would help 1 or 2 people. The book was released in October 2013, when Sarah was in her second year of residency and Ethan was nearly 5 years old. What happened next completely surprised Sarah. The book began to spread, word of mouth, from support group to support group, from family to family. Parents of children with Down syndrome and other special needs began buying the book, sharing it, writing emotional reviews. Within 3 months, My Son, My Hero was on Amazon's bestseller list in the health memoir category. Sarah began receiving emails, dozens, then hundreds, from parents thanking her for sharing her story, saying the book had given them hope when they needed it most. A national publisher contacted her, wanting to republish the book with wider distribution. Sarah signed the contract, still incredulous at what was happening. The book was relaunched in April 2014, with a new cover and distribution in bookstores across the country. Sales exploded. Sarah began being invited to speak at medical conferences, support groups, and hospitals. She spoke about her journey, about Ethan, about the importance of seeing children with special needs not as a burden, but as complete, wonderful human beings who simply needed proper support. And people listened. They really listened. Sarah was building something bigger than herself. She was building hope. She was building community. She was showing the world that single mothers, children with special needs, non-traditional families were not failures. They were warriors. In 2015, Sarah completed her residency and officially became a certified pediatrician. At 29, she was now Dr. Sarah Coleman, a physician specializing in developmental pediatrics. But Sarah didn't just want to work in a hospital. She had a bigger vision. The success of her book had brought not only recognition, but also significant income. For the first time in her life, Sarah had savings, and she knew exactly what she wanted to do with it. She wanted to open her own clinic, a clinic specializing in children with special needs, where families could find not only medical care, but full support, therapies, guidance, resources, community. Sarah worked tirelessly for months, developing a business plan, seeking investors, finding a suitable location. It was difficult. Many investors didn't take a young woman with a sad story seriously, as some cruelly described it. But Sarah didn't give up. She refined her proposal, improved her projections, and kept trying. It was Dr. Chun who, once again, opened a crucial door. He introduced Sarah to a group of medical investors in Dallas who were interested in innovative projects in pediatric healthcare. Sarah's presentation to them was visceral and moving. She didn't just show numbers and projections. She told stories. Stories of families she had treated during her residency. Stories of children like Ethan, who had so much potential but lacked proper resources. Stories of mothers who were struggling alone, without support. And she told her own story. When Ethan was born, she said to the group of investors, her voice steady but filled with emotion, I was alone, scared, and had no idea how to care for a child with special needs. I was lucky. I found people who helped me. But what about the thousands of mothers who aren't that lucky? And families living in areas without adequate resources? And children who never reach their potential simply because they don't have the support they need? She paused, looking each investor in the eye. I'm not asking for charity. I'm offering an investment opportunity in something that will not only provide financial return, but change lives. Literally save lives. And in a market where the demand for specialized services is only growing, this is both a good business and the right thing to do. The silence that followed was heavy. Then one of the investors, a middle-aged man named Robert Harris, leaned forward. Dr. Coleman, how much do you need? Sarah took a deep breath. $500,000 to start. This will give us a basic clinic, essential equipment, and operating capital for the first 6 months while we build our patient base. Robert exchanged glances with the other investors. Then he smiled. You have your investment, but with one condition. We want to be partners, not just silent investors. We want to help you build this the right way. Sarah couldn't hold back her tears. She had done it. She had really done it. The Hope Clinic, chosen by Ethan, who insisted that Hope was the perfect name, opened its doors in September 2015 in a modest but welcoming building in North Dallas. The clinic offered specialized pediatric consultations, but also physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and, uniquely, parent support groups. Sarah had hired a small but dedicated team of therapists and doctors who shared her vision. And she implemented something revolutionary, a sliding scale payment system. Families with means paid the full rate, but families struggling financially paid according to what they could afford. No one would be turned away for lack of money. The investors were skeptical at first, worried this would make the clinic financially unsustainable. But Sarah had done the math. With the continued success of her book, with donations she was actively seeking, and with the patient volume she projected, it was viable. And she was right. Hope Clinic quickly gained a reputation. Parents began coming from across the Dallas area. Some came from even farther away, willing to travel hours to access the compassionate and comprehensive care Sarah offered. Sarah was often at the clinic from 7 in the morning until 7 at night, seeing patients, supervising therapies, talking with families. But she always made sure to be home in time for dinner with Ethan and to put him to bed. Ethan, now almost 7, was thriving. He attended an inclusive school, where he was in a regular classroom with support from an aide. He was learning to read, making friends, developing in ways Sarah had barely dared to dream of years ago. And he loved visiting Mommy's clinic. "Mommy is a doctor for special kids like me," he proudly told anyone who would listen. One day, Sarah was in her office when her receptionist, Maria, knocked at the door. "Dr. Sarah, someone is here to see you. She says it's personal." Sarah frowned. She had no personal appointments scheduled, but she told Maria to let the person in. When the door opened, Sarah froze completely. There, standing in the doorway of her office, was her sister, Victoria. 7 years had passed since Sarah left Washington. 7 years without any contact with her family. And now, there was Victoria, older, with a few wrinkles that hadn't been there before, but still impeccably dressed and groomed. "Hello, Sarah," Victoria said, her voice hesitant in a way Sarah had never heard before. Sarah couldn't speak. She was in shock, her heart racing wildly. I know I don't have the right to be here," Victoria continued, slowly entering the office. "I know we haven't spoken in years, but I had to come. I had to see you. How did you find me?" Sarah finally managed to say, her voice hoarse, "Your book." Victoria replied simply, "I read your book, and then I researched, and I found out about your clinic." "Sarah," she paused, and to Sarah's surprise, tears began rolling down Victoria's face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. For not defending you. For letting Dad kick you out. For being a coward. I'm so sorry." Sarah was silent, processing. Part of her wanted to scream, to throw Victoria out as she had been thrown out. But another part, the part that had grown and matured through years of struggle, simply felt a deep sadness. "Why now, Victoria?" she asked calmly. "Why after 7 years?" Victoria wiped her tears, trying to compose herself. "Because I had a daughter," she said softly. 6 months ago, and holding my baby, all I could think was, how could I let my sister go through this alone? How could I be so cruel?" Sarah felt her own tears beginning to fall. Victoria continued, "And then I read your book, every word, and I cried on every page. Sarah, you built an incredible life. You became a doctor. You opened a clinic. You raised a wonderful son. And you did it all alone, without any support from us. And that shames me deeply. How is Mom?" Sarah asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Victoria sighed. "She never forgave you. I don't think she ever forgave herself for not defending you. She cries on your birthday. She keeps a picture of you hidden in a drawer, but she's too cowardly to stand up to Dad." And him. Sarah wasn't sure she wanted to know, but she had to ask. Victoria hesitated. "He is sick, Sarah. Very sick." And that was how Sarah learned, for the first time in 7 years, that her father was dying. The revelation about Richard's illness shook Sarah in ways she hadn't expected. After Victoria left, promising to return so they could talk more, Sarah sat in her office for hours, processing. Her father was sick. Her father, who had rejected her, who had thrown her out, who had chosen pride over his own daughter, was now facing his own mortality. Sarah didn't know how to feel. There was anger, yes, but there was also deep sadness. And, surprisingly, there was concern. She didn't immediately share this information with anyone, not even Rosa, who had become her chosen family. Sarah needed to process it on her own first. In the following months, Victoria visited a few more times. They talked cautiously, rebuilding a relationship that had been broken. Victoria met Ethan, and to her credit, was genuinely charmed by the nephew she had never known. "He's amazing, Sarah," Victoria said, watching Ethan play with blocks in the clinic waiting room. "You've done an incredible job with him." "We did an incredible job together," Sarah corrected. "He's taught me as much as I've taught him." During this time, Hope Clinic continued to grow. Sarah published a second book, Raising Hope, a practical guide for parents of children with special needs, which became an instant bestseller and an essential resource for families and healthcare professionals. The royalties from the books, combined with the clinic's success, meant that Sarah was now financially stable, more than stable in fact. She was thriving, but Sarah never forgot where she came from. She established a scholarship fund for single mothers studying medicine. She regularly donated to organizations that supported families of children with special needs. She was paying it forward, just as she had promised Dr. Chen years ago. In 2016, Sarah made a bold decision. She wanted to expand. The demand for services like those at Hope Clinic was enormous, not just in Dallas, but throughout Texas and beyond. She developed a plan to open a second location, this time with even more comprehensive facilities. A full center with not only medical consultations and therapies, but also educational programs, vocational training for teenagers with special needs, and cutting-edge technological resources. The original investors were enthusiastic. The projections were solid, Sarah's reputation impeccable, and the demand clearly there. But to realize her full vision, Sarah needed more investment. She needed a partner hospital, and the hospital she had in mind was one of the most prestigious in Texas, Dallas Central Medical Center. Sarah scheduled a meeting with the hospital board to present her proposal. It was an ambitious plan, a partnership where the hospital would provide facilities and resources, and Sarah would bring her expertise, reputation, and vision. The meeting was set for March 2017. Sarah prepared her presentation meticulously. This was the opportunity to transform her small but successful clinic into something truly transformative. The night before the meeting, Sarah was nervous. Ethan, now 8 years old and surprisingly perceptive, noticed. "Mommy, are you worried?" he asked as Sarah tucked him into bed. "A little bit, sweetie," Sarah admitted. "Mommy has a very important meeting tomorrow." "You'll do great," Ethan said with the absolute certainty of a child. "You always do." Sarah smiled, kissing his forehead. "You're my lucky charm, you know." "I know," Ethan replied, making Sarah laugh. The meeting took place in an impressive conference room on the top floor of Dallas Central Medical Center. The board was present, 8 men and 3 women, all formally dressed, all looking at Sarah with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Sarah presented her vision. She spoke about the desperate need for integrated services for children with special needs. She showed data on the effectiveness of early interventions. She shared testimonies from families whose lives had been transformed by Hope Clinic. And she painted a picture of what could be. A center of excellence that would not only serve Texas, but become a national model. When she finished, there were questions, many questions, about funding, sustainability, risks. Sarah answered every one with confidence and clarity. She had done her homework. She knew the numbers. She had the answers. Finally, the hospital CEO, a man named James Morrison, leaned forward. "Dr. Coleman, your proposal is impressive. Your trajectory is inspiring. And frankly, your passion is undeniable. The board will deliberate and will contact you within a week." Sarah thanked him and left the meeting with a mix of hope and apprehension. She had given her best. Now it was just a matter of waiting. 3 days later, she received a call. "Dr. Coleman?" It was James Morrison. The board voted unanimously in favor of the partnership. "Welcome to Dallas Central Medical Center." Sarah almost dropped the phone. She had done it. She had really done it. The Hope Center, as the new center would be called, began construction in May 2017. It would be a state-of-the-art facility, 3 floors, with specialized offices, therapy rooms equipped with advanced technology, a sensory room for children with autism, a gym for physical therapy, classrooms for educational programs, and even an outdoor play area. Sarah was involved in every detail of the planning, from the wall colors, chosen to be calming yet stimulating, to the type of equipment, the most advanced, but also the most child-friendly. She wanted everything to be perfect. During construction, something significant happened in Sarah's personal life. Victoria called, her voice tense. "Sarah, it's about Dad. He has gotten much worse. The doctors are recommending he go to a specialized hospital for intensive treatment, and he's looking for the best. He wants to go to Dallas Central Medical Center." Sarah was silent, processing the irony. Her father, who had rejected her, was now coming to the hospital where she was one of the most respected doctors and would soon be co-director of one of the most important centers. "When?" she finally asked. "Next week." "Sarah, I know this is complicated, but he doesn't know you're there. He doesn't know about everything you've built. Maybe it's better this way. I don't know. I just thought you should know." Sarah thanked Victoria and hung up. Her heart raced. Part of her wanted to avoid her father entirely, but another part, the part that had matured through years of struggle, the part that had learned about forgiveness through raising Ethan, knew this would be a crucial moment. Fate, it seemed, was forcing a meeting that had been years overdue, and Sarah wasn't sure she was ready. Sarah spent the following week in a constant state of anxiety. She knew Richard Coleman would be admitted to Dallas Central Medical Center on Monday. She knew that, eventually, their paths would cross. What she hadn't expected was for it to happen so quickly. It was Tuesday morning when Sarah was making her rounds in the hospital. She had just finished a consultation when she heard a familiar voice echoing down the corridor. The voice of her mother, Elizabeth. Sarah froze, her heart racing. She cautiously turned the corner and saw, about 20 meters away, her mother speaking with a nurse. Elizabeth looked older, her hair now completely gray, but still maintained that elegant posture Sarah remembered. For a moment, Sarah considered approaching, but then she saw Marcus appear, now a 26-year-old man, and she recoiled. She wasn't ready. Not yet. She turned around and walked in the opposite direction, her white coat billowing behind her. But Sarah couldn't avoid reality forever. As co-director of the Hope Center and a respected physician at the hospital, she would eventually be called in for consultations. And that's exactly what happened 2 days later. Dr. Coleman, her assistant Jennifer, knocked on the door of her office. "Dr. Morrison is requesting your input on a case. Patient with advanced cancer. Family is considering palliative care. He wants your perspective on how to support the family during the process." Sarah agreed, unsuspecting. She grabbed her tablet and followed Jennifer down the corridors until they reached room 408. Jennifer opened the door and Sarah entered, eyes on the tablet as she quickly reviewed the patient's chart. "Good morning, I'm Dr. Cole." She stopped abruptly, lifting her eyes. There, lying in the hospital bed, visibly thin and weakened by illness, was her father, and sitting in chairs beside the bed were her mother, Victoria, and Marcus. The silence that fell over the room was absolute and heavy. Richard looked at her, and Sarah saw the exact moment he recognized her. His eyes widened, his mouth fell open in shock. "Sarah." Elizabeth was the first to speak, rising slowly from her chair, a hand over her heart. "Sarah, is that you?" Victoria and Marcus also stood, but it was Marcus who stepped forward. "Sarah, we didn't know you worked here." Sarah tried to regain her professional composure, but her hands shook as she held the tablet. I'm one of the pediatricians here," she managed to say, her voice surprisingly steady, "and co-director of the Hope Center that's being built on campus." "Hope Center?" Elizabeth repeated, confused. "The Center for Children with Special Needs that's been getting so much attention?" "Yes," Sarah replied, looking directly at her mother for the first time in 9 years. "That's my center, my project." Richard, who had remained silent, finally spoke, his voice hoarse and weak. You became a doctor? After everything?" Sarah felt the old anger bubbling inside her, but forced herself to remain calm. "Yes, I graduated, completed residency, and now I'm building something that will help thousands of families. Families like mine, who were abandoned and judged." The impact of her words was visible. Elizabeth began to cry quietly. Victoria lowered her eyes. Marcus looked proud and ashamed at the same time. "And Ethan?" Richard asked, and there was something different in his voice, something resembling regret. "The child, your son?" Sarah lifted her chin. eyes shining with unshed tears, but also fierce pride. My son Ethan is 9 years old. He goes to school in an inclusive classroom. He reads, writes, has friends, and is the happiest, most loving person you could meet. He is my greatest pride and joy. And he didn't need you. We built a beautiful life on our own. Richard closed his eyes, and a tear ran down his aged face. I made a mistake, he whispered. A terrible mistake. Sarah remained silent for a long moment. Then she took a deep breath and regained her professional posture. Mr. Coleman, I will ask another doctor to take over your case. I cannot be objective here, but the hospital will take good care of you. She turned to leave, but Richard's weak voice stopped her. Sarah, please. Please don't go. Not yet. Sarah paused at the door, but did not turn around. I have nothing more to say to you. You made your choice 9 years ago. Now I've made mine. And she left, leaving her family in stunned silence. Sarah spent the following days avoiding that wing of the hospital. She knew she was being cowardly, but she wasn't ready to confront all that pain again. It was Marcus who finally found her. He was waiting in the parking lot when Sarah left work on a Thursday night. Sarah, please, he said, approaching cautiously. Just give me 5 minutes. Sarah sighed, too tired to argue. 5 minutes, Marcus. He's dying, Marcus said bluntly. The cancer has spread. They're giving him maybe 2 months, at most 3. And Sarah, he's devastated. Not by the disease, by what he did to you. And I'm supposed to care? Sarah asked, though her voice lacked the hardness she intended. No, Marcus admitted. You shouldn't. He doesn't deserve your forgiveness. None of us do. But Sarah, he's my father. And I'm about to lose him. And I know he'll die carrying that guilt if you don't at least talk to him. Once. Just once. Sarah looked at her younger brother, now a man. A man who, unlike the rest of the family, had tried to help her when she needed it most. I'll think about it, she finally said. That night, Sarah spoke with Ethan. At 9 years old, he was surprisingly wise. Mom, you're sad, he observed as they had dinner. I am, sweetie. Mom's family, they showed up all of a sudden, and there's a lot of complicated history there. Did they hurt you? Ethan asked, his almond-shaped eyes serious. Yes, Sarah admitted. A long time ago, they hurt me a lot. Ethan thought for a moment, chewing his dinner. Then he said something that surprised Sarah. At school, the teacher says forgiving doesn't mean what the person did was okay. It means you don't want to carry the hurt anymore. Are you still carrying the hurt, Mom? Sarah looked at her son, this incredible boy she had raised, and realized that yes, she was still carrying that hurt, and she was tired of carrying it. The next day, Sarah returned to room 408. Richard was alone when she entered. He looked even weaker than a few days before, the disease clearly progressing rapidly. Sarah, he said when he saw her, try and sit up in bed. You're back. I didn't come here for you, Sarah said, keeping her distance. I came for me, because I realized I'm tired of carrying anger. Richard nodded slowly. I don't expect your forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable. I kicked my own daughter out when she needed me most. I rejected my grandson without even knowing him. I chose pride and reputation over my family. He paused, struggling to breathe and control his emotions. But I want you to know, not a single day went by that I didn't think of you. Not a single day went by that I didn't regret it. I destroyed my family because of my stupid pride. Victoria barely talks to me. Elizabeth cries every time she sees a photo of you. Marcus never forgave me for kicking you out, and I deserve all of this. Yes, you deserve it, Sarah said, her own tears beginning to fall. You hurt me in ways I didn't even know were possible. You made me feel worthless, that my son was worthless. And I was wrong, Richard said, his voice breaking. So terribly wrong. Sarah, you've built something incredible. You became an exceptional doctor. You raised a wonderful child. You are 10 times the person I am. And I lost all of that because I was a proud, cruel fool. Sarah wiped her tears, breathing deeply. I cannot change the past, Dad, and neither can you. But I can choose not to let the past destroy my future. So I'll tell you this. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I deserve to move forward without this anger consuming me." Richard was openly crying now. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, my daughter." "But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting," Sarah continued. "And it doesn't mean everything is okay. You lost 9 years of my life. 9 years of your grandson's life. That doesn't come back." "I know," Richard said. "But could I meet him? Meet Ethan? Just once, before I—" Sarah fell silent, considering. Then she nodded slowly. "I'll ask him. If he wants to meet you, I'll bring him. But the choice is his, not mine." When Sarah asked Ethan if he wanted to meet his grandfather, he thought for a moment. "Is he the man who hurt you?" he asked. "Yes," Sarah answered honestly. "But is he sorry?" "Yes, he is." Ethan considered this for a long moment. Then, with the simple wisdom of a child, he said, "Then I want to meet him, because everyone deserves a chance to say they're sorry." Sarah took Ethan to the hospital the following Saturday. On the way, she explained that Grandpa was very sick, that he looked different because of treatment, but that he was very eager to meet him. When they entered room 408, the entire Coleman family was there. Elizabeth began crying immediately upon seeing Ethan. Victoria covered her mouth with her hands. Marcus smiled broadly, but it was Richard who had the strongest reaction. When Ethan entered, holding Sarah's hand, Richard looked at his grandson for the first time and simply broke down in tears. "Hello," Ethan said, unafraid, letting go of Sarah's hand and stepping closer to the bed. "Are you my grandpa?" "Yes," Richard managed to say through his tears. "Yes, I am. And you are Ethan?" "I am," Ethan said proudly. "I'm 9 years old. I can read and write. I like dinosaurs and helping Mom at her clinic. And I have Down syndrome. But that doesn't make me different, just special." Richard laughed through his tears, one hand trembling as he reached for Ethan. "You really are special. Very special. And I'm so sorry, Ethan. I'm sorry for not being there from the beginning." "It's okay," Ethan said with the effortless forgiveness that only children possess. "Mom says you were confused. But now you're not, right?" "No," Richard said firmly. "I'm not confused anymore. I know exactly what matters now." Ethan spent the next hour telling Richard about his life, about school, about his friends, about the things he was learning. Richard listened to every word as if it were gold, asking questions, laughing at his stories, clearly delighted. Elizabeth eventually approached Sarah. "He's perfect," she whispered. "Completely perfect." "Sarah, I know, Mom," Sarah said softly. "I know." They hugged for the first time in 9 years, both of them crying. Richard Coleman passed away 6 weeks later, surrounded by his family, including Sarah and Ethan. In the final days of his life, Richard had requested to see Ethan every day. And every day, Ethan went, telling stories, showing drawings, simply being the joyful light he was. "You've given me a gift," Richard said to Sarah during one of his last conscious days. "You showed me what really matters, and I wasted so much time not realizing it." The funeral was modest, attended only by close family. Sarah was there, not for Richard, but for Marcus, for Victoria, and surprisingly, for Elizabeth, who had begun to rebuild a cautious relationship with her. It was a week after the funeral that the family lawyer called everyone in for the reading of the will. Sarah almost didn't go. She didn't want anything from the Coleman fortune. She had built her own life, her own success. But Marcus insisted she needed to be there. The reading took place in the family law office. Present were Sarah, Victoria, Marcus, Elizabeth, and a few distant cousins. The lawyer, an elderly man named Mr. Patterson, opened the envelope and began to read. Most of the fortune was divided evenly among Elizabeth, Victoria, and Marcus, as expected. But then came the part that left everyone in shock. "And to my grandson, Ethan Coleman, whom I met too late, but loved deeply in the time we had, I leave the West Virginia property. The Coleman Holdings investment portfolio, valued at approximately $8 million, and my collection of classical art. May these resources be used to ensure he has every opportunity and care he deserves." The office fell completely silent. $8 million. For Ethan. Victoria was the first to speak, her voice loud and indignant. "This is absurd. He barely knew the boy. How can he leave so much for his nephew? Sarah interrupted calmly. For the child you all rejected? It's not fair. Victoria insisted. We were there for years. We cared for him, and he leaves a fortune to a child he met for only a few weeks. Victoria, that's enough, Elizabeth said firmly, surprising everyone. But Sarah raised her hand. No, it's fine. Let her speak, because I want everyone to hear what I have to say. Sarah stood, looking at each person in the room. I don't want this inheritance. Not a single cent. Not for me, not for Ethan. We don't need the Coleman money. We've built our own life, our own success. Sarah, Marcus began, but she continued. But I will not refuse on Ethan's behalf, because this inheritance isn't really about money. It's the last way our father is apologizing. It's the acknowledgement that he was wrong, and Ethan deserves that acknowledgement. She turned to the lawyer. Mr. Patterson, I accept the inheritance on behalf of Ethan, but with one condition. All of this money will be used to establish the Ethan Coleman Foundation for Children with Special Needs. Every penny will be invested in building centers, providing resources, and supporting families. The Coleman name will finally mean something good, something that helps instead of judging. The lawyer smiled. Actually, Dr. Coleman, your father included a personal note that I was instructed to read only if you were present. He opened a smaller envelope and read, Sarah, if you are hearing this, it means you came, despite everything I did. This does not surprise me. You have always been stronger and better than I. I hope you use these resources to continue your incredible work. Make the Coleman name mean something worthwhile. I know you will. With all my love and regret, Dad. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. 18 months later, in October 2019, Sarah stood on the stage of the new Ethan Coleman Technology Center for Children with Special Needs. The construction had been fully funded by the inheritance, transformed through the foundation. It was a state-of-the-art facility. 3 floors of specialized therapies, rooms equipped with cutting-edge assistive technology, innovative educational programs, and resources for families. But more than that, it was a symbol that from abandonment can come love, from rejection can emerge acceptance, and from the deepest pain, hope can grow. The inauguration ceremony was packed. There were families, doctors, therapists, journalists, and local officials. And in the front row, sitting together, were Elizabeth, Victoria, Marcus, and Rosa, the biological and chosen family of Sarah, finally united. But beside Sarah on the stage was the most important person, Ethan, now 11 years old, wearing a suit he had chosen himself, bright blue. Because blue is the color of hope, Mommy. Sarah stepped up to the microphone, Ethan at her side. 11 years ago, she began, her voice clear and strong. I was a scared young woman, pregnant and alone. My family had rejected me. The father of my baby had abandoned me, and I had just received the diagnosis that my child would have Down syndrome. She paused, looking at Ethan, who smiled at her. At that moment, I thought my life was over. I thought my entire future was destroyed. I didn't know that, in fact, my life was only beginning. That the baby I carried in my womb would become my greatest teacher, my greatest love, and the inspiration for everything I would build. The audience was completely silent, absorbing every word. This center is not just about technology or therapies. Although those things are important, this center is about a simple truth. Every child deserves to be loved. Every child deserves opportunities. Every child, no matter their abilities or differences, has infinite value. Sarah took Ethan's hand. My son taught me this. He taught me that strength isn't never falling, but always getting back up. He taught me that family isn't about blood, but about who is there in the hard times. He taught me that forgiveness is not weakness, but the greatest form of strength. Ethan stepped up to the microphone, and Sarah lowered it for him. I just want to say, Ethan said, his voice clear despite its characteristic imprecision, that all special kids are amazing, and this center will help many kids like me be the best they can be. The audience erupted in applause. People stood, some crying, all clearly moved. When the noise subsided, Sarah returned to the microphone for her closing words. To parents who are struggling today, I see you. I was you. And I am here to say, you can do this. To doctors and therapists, thank you for not only treating, but for genuinely caring. And to the children, you are not defined by your differences. You are defined by your courage, your love, and your limitless potential. She looked directly at the camera broadcasting live. This center is my legacy, but more importantly, it is a reminder that from abandonment and rejection, we can build something beautiful. From pain, we can create hope. And from a mother's love for her child, we can change the world. Sarah cut the ribbon with Ethan, officially opening the center. Confetti fell, music played, and people began exploring the facilities. Later that night, after everyone had left, Sarah was alone in the main hall of the center with Ethan. A bronze plaque adorned the wall, which they had just unveiled. Ethan Coleman Technology Center in memory of Richard Coleman, who learned too late what truly matters, and in celebration of all special children, who teach us daily about unconditional love. Founded by Dr. Sarah Coleman and her son, Ethan Coleman. Mommy, Ethan said, looking at the plaque, do you think Grandpa would be proud? Sarah knelt beside her son, hugging him tightly. I know he would be, sweetheart, very proud of you, of this center, of everything we've accomplished. And are you proud, Mommy? Sarah looked around the illuminated center, thought of all she had endured, every challenge she had overcome, every tear she had shed, and every victory she had celebrated. Yes, my love, she said, kissing the top of his head. I am incredibly proud of you, of me, of us. We took the pain and turned it into purpose. We took rejection and turned it into love. And that, my son, is the greatest success of all. Ethan hugged her tightly. I love you, Mommy. You're my hero. And you're mine, Ethan. Always have been, always will be. Mother and son stood there, embraced in the center that represented everything they had achieved together. An empire not of money, but of hope. Not of power, but of love. Not of revenge, but of forgiveness and redemption. Sarah Coleman had been banished for choosing her child. But from that choice, from that unconditional love, something extraordinary was born. She had proven that a mother fighting for her child can move mountains, build empires, and change the world. And she had done it not despite Ethan, but because of him. Because in the end, the greatest legacy is not what we build, but who we love and how we love. This story of Sarah and Ethan shows us that even in the darkest moments, when everything seems lost, there is hope. There is strength in every mother who fights for her child. There is power in unconditional love. And there's the possibility of redemption, even after the gravest mistakes. If you were moved by this journey, give this video a like. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that a mother's strength can move mountains. And subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more real stories of overcoming, forgiveness, and unconditional love that touch the soul.